Hi, everybody. I am Michelle Tennant. I am the president of Henderson County Beekeepers Association. I'm at the extension office because we had an intern today, and I'm not back in my office yet, so I've got some limited bandwidth. So I want to introduce a Duke professor, Melissa LeRoy, who's going to be talking to us about empowering volunteers. And so, Melissa, since they may not be able to hear me well, I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay, well, wonderful. Welcome, everyone. As Michelle said, I'm Melissa LeRoy, and I am currently coming to you from my home, actually, which is in Forest City. However, I actually grew up in Henderson County. So a lot of my mother's family is from there, the Jackson clan. So many of you may know some of those individuals. And so we actually lived in Henderson County the majority of our tenure there. We moved here to Forest City in 2020. And because of COVID, I am kind of remote now, like the majority of people. I don't typically get actually to Duke University very often anymore. So I'm looking forward, though, to more in person. I've had a couple of those. This year, we've started back in person. However, the majority of the courses that I teach are still virtual, still remote as well. So I have kind of tweaked a little bit of a presentation that I have done over the years. Of course, I have been teaching for Duke University since 2007. This is one of about 18 different courses that I teach in nonprofit management and also small business as well. So I kind of specialize in social entrepreneurship so as well. So this is a course that I teach quite regularly for volunteers, and it was based upon a series of articles that I wrote and published back in 2010. So I hope that it's going to be very helpful for you. Michelle, is this kind of all that you're expecting right now to show up?
Yes, and so it's also being recorded for those who couldn't show up. And I'll be watching the room, and I'll be including anybody else who needs to be admitted.
Okay. Wonderful.
Okay. So you can just take it away, and I really appreciate you volunteering your time and doing this for us.
Absolutely. So let me make sure that I get the right screen pulled up here for all of you. So hopefully everybody can see my screen, the first page of the PowerPoint presentation. So just kind of wave to me if you can see that. It was kind of a little slow in loading that today. So I do also offer my services via consulting. And then also I do teach for another university here in North Carolina, which is Western Carolina University, which I hold 2 degrees from that university. So I really want to this evening for this to be interactive. So please don't hesitate to interrupt, ask questions. If you have comments or concerns, I welcome those as well. You will see.
Hey, so Melissa, I'm sorry to interrupt, but do you want us to be muted or unmuted? Like it's a small group, so I don't know if that bothers you at all, but right now everybody's pretty much unmuted except for me. Is that cool?
Yes, that is perfectly fine. So that way you can flag me down if you have questions, comments, concerns. You will see once I get started, the nonprofit sector is very near and dear to my heart. So I could sit here, probably all of you, and speak on this topic of volunteers alone for probably the next 7 hours. However, I want to make sure that I'm a really good steward of your time, because I know a lot of you have taken time away from things this evening to be here with us.
Not to mention, we all have to go over to the beer garden where we're meeting for a Be Social tonight at 7. So.
Oh, well, I'm sorry I'm missing that.
Yeah, you're invited.
Might take me a little bit. You never know. I-26 construction traffic's a little iffy now, right?
Amen.
Always.
For sure.
This is true. I come up actually every Tuesday. My in-laws live in Fletcher, so I come up and help them with small projects. And it's, I never know if I'm going to get there on time or if I'm going to be sitting there for an hour and a half. You just never know. This is, one of those things. So, but thank you for that invitation. That was so kind. All right. So the things that I'm going to be talking about this evening is going to be, how do we equip our volunteers, empower our volunteers, and retain our volunteers? We don't want to be known as an organization with a revolving door. So how do we prevent that from happening? So the first thing is, like with any job, right? A full-time job. And we know that with volunteers, this is basically a full-time job. However, you're not paid for this, right? Well, in the sense of monetary. Hopefully you do get recognition, and we'll talk about that a little later. So some really helpful recommendations for successfully onboarding volunteers is to make sure to make the time for that very important first interview. So that initial, whether it's an in-person interview, it's that phone conversation to identify potential volunteers, making sure that we're going over with them and that we have in our possession a very detailed job description for our volunteers. So they know exactly what we expect of them before we sit down and have this interview. Because if this is not something that they are going to be able to do for us, then of course, we don't want to waste their time and our time just the same. We also need to have a handbook, right? Outlining or describing all of our volunteer expectations. So this needs to include everything that the volunteer needs to know in order to be successful for our organization. So some sample things might look like history of the organization. How was the organization founded? Are some of those founding members still involved in the organization today? Who are they? And some of the main activities and or events that our organization still continues to host to this day. We want to make sure that we utilize the same main board members or the main volunteer leaders to onboard new volunteers. This is going to ensure that there is consistent, uniform communication. And I'll talk about that. I'll talk about what a consistent communication plan looks like for nonprofit organizations. And then also we want to make sure that there's a strategy for follow-up. So a check-in process. So when we onboard new volunteers at the 1 week, the 2 week, the 1 month, 2 month mark, and this is going to vary from organization to organization, because we all know that poorly equipped volunteers, right, will stop showing up. They're just going to stop serving the organization, and we don't want that to happen. We also need to make sure that we have some type of training for our volunteers. So whether it's a training like you're participating in with me this evening, or if it's a training on your specific mission, vision, and values of your organization. And then the pre-recorded training as well. And that's when Michelle first reached out to me and she said, do you mind if we record this for those who might not be able to join us? I welcome that. I think that's wonderful. So hopefully this will be something that you can put in your archive going forward, right, for new volunteers in addition to those existing. So we need kind of that annual training plan. So we need an annual calendar for our volunteers so they know exactly what to expect in terms of events, whether they're fundraising events, awareness building events, and or just training events as well. So the consistent communication plan. Once we have a volunteer, they've been onboarded by your team, so your leadership team, that key team, whoever that is for your organization, it is crucial for a consistent communication plan to keep individuals equipped to serve your organization. So we need to have what I call those VIP meetings, right? Where these are meetings in person prior to that volunteer service. So some of the talking points, can be tweaked new information that the team, volunteers need, the team members need. It could just simply be to introduce new volunteers joining your organization, joining your volunteer leadership team or your board of directors, right? We also need to make sure that we keep them involved and connect with them very regularly. So this typically is in the form of weekly emails to your volunteers. If weekly emails are too much, then maybe it needs to be monthly. However, have a dedicated time and or day of the week where your volunteers know if there's any new information and or, hey, we're just checking in, just letting you know everything is status quo. Our programs, project services, and activities are going forward, whatever that looks like, but make sure to send them early enough to where if anybody has any questions right before a brand new program, project, service, and or activity is launched, that there's enough time for discussion. Michelle, question.
Yeah, the question I have is, so in the regular communications, is this what we do right now as part of our newsletter? But are you saying, and hi, Dr. Kelly just joined us. Are you, and he's the reason why we're having this meeting, because he had recommended to me that this type of training would be really useful for us to empower volunteers. Thank you, Dr. Kelly. We have a different type of email chain to our volunteers than what is to our regular membership body? Can you describe the differences?
Absolutely. So with those VIP meetings, right, following up on that, to then say, letting those key volunteers know before that email newsletter goes out to your entire constituent database, right? So if you have been keeping up with a database, you may have people on there that signed up years ago. They're not very active in the organization. However, they still want to be kept informed. And then you have these volunteers like yourselves, right, that are helping with the programs, projects, services, and activities, helping with the leadership of the nonprofit organization. So we want to make sure to give them that VIP treatment, to really get them involved in the organization at a deeper level. So empowering them. They're going to know first before it hits the email newsletter out to everyone in the organization, right? So you can do the VIP meetings, but also then follow it up. Because the reality is here, right? If you're a volunteer, we have a lot going on, don't we? I mean, we're volunteering typically for other organizations. Some of us may have a full-time job, and we need to be kind of reminded, hey, the email newsletter is going out. We're just announcing this brand new program that we're rolling out, right, for the Beekeepers Association and what this looks like. And here's some talking points in case anybody in Henderson County decides to suddenly stop you on the street, right? You're on Main Street, you're getting ready to go into Mezzaluna to have a piece of pizza, whatever that looks like, right? Mm-hmm. And you need, right, some of those key talking points. So here's that email. Here's what we talked about on that last VIP Zoom meeting, whether it's in person or whether it's in Zoom. We may have been distracted, right? I mean, the dog underneath our feet may have been acting up. We could have had children or grandchildren running around the house like banshees, whatever the case may look like for you. We need that little bit of a reminder. So it's very important to ensure that those key leadership volunteers are kept right up to date, and we're providing them with the latest information, those key talking points. It's very, very crucial here. And then regular group communication. So setting up that private page, that platform, whether you're using, Facebook groups, whatever it looks like for your organization, you're using kind of the new Google platform for nonprofit organizations where you have that chat feature, but regular group communication, or it could be just a joint text message going out to all of those key volunteers. Hey, so let's say, Jim, I'm going to pick on you for just a second because you're the first one that I saw when I looked down to everybody in attendance, right? So Jim may have wanted to announce that, hey, you know what, those talking points that you provided for this new program were spot on. It was wonderful. I just got this $1,000 contribution from one of my dear oldest friends, right? Walking into Mezzaluna, they stopped me and said, hey, Jim, we just got the, monthly email newsletter. What's this all about? And Jim's able to talk to that individual, right? And now then we're able to really foster that communication and that relationship. And you never know, Jim, that friend may even turn out to be the next board member, right? Who knows? Yeah, exactly. So making sure. And then also personal communication. So we must have a strategy so that every volunteer feels connected with our organization, okay? Often personal requests and even quality feedback come from individual conversations along with the opportunity to answer questions and offer support. That's why the VIP meetings, that weekly or monthly communication, those joint text messages, joint emails, whatever that looks like for your organization is very, very important for empowering volunteers and retaining. We want to, again, make sure that they feel very important to our organization because they are. So as much as possible, we want to ensure that we give our volunteers the new information prior to it being shared with your entire constituent database. So allow them time to kind of process this, right? Ask their own questions. Again, they may have been so distracted when we were announcing this that they're like, oh, wait a minute, I must have missed that. Let me make sure, right, that I completely understand what is going on here. And then also, we need to consider what our volunteers need to know to be successful in response to current events, right? So this may be I'm just going to throw this out there. This may be the whole entire situation of, the toxicity, right, with insecticides and pesticides and all of this that we're hearing right on the news. And how does this affect, right, our overall organization as beekeepers, right? So we want to make sure that our volunteers know how this relationally relates in the current season that we find ourselves in, right? We're in the middle of summer right now. When is the most active time, right? When people are going to be thinking about getting beehives. They're going to be thinking about talking about bees. Once they find out that your passion is also, with bees, right? Making sure that our volunteer knows what resources and support our organization offers, as well as how to access those resources. So is this a shared Google Drive that all of our volunteers know how to access? We've shared this hyperlink with them multiple times so they know, hey, it's organized via folders, via resource, whatever that looks like for the organization, but making sure time and time again in our communication that we are referencing those resources and how to access that via that URL link. Okay. So a checklist that I've used for many years here for empowering volunteers. Number one rule of thumb, everyone, don't ask a high impact volunteer to join your organization if you're not ready to let them lead. Make room on your team for them to actually lead the organization with you. Okay. This has to be a group effort here. I can't stress this enough, is to listen. So if you have a high impact team with wonderful high impact volunteers around you, create time to really listen to what they are experiencing, kind of that feedback, right? So you'll find, once again, and I kind of said this in the beginning, I can talk on this topic all day long. However, at the end, I'm going to take a few moments to really listen, right, for your feedback, okay? And for most people, that's really hard active listening, because if you think about today's society, we listen typically only to respond, right? So we want to ensure, though, that we are scheduling time to really listen to our volunteers. And I've alluded to this several times already, that volunteers have limited time. Either they're volunteering for multiple organizations that have another full-time job, they're full-time caregivers, parents, guardians of their grandchildren, whatever this may look like for them. So remember with volunteers to be very patient. Take time to breathe and be a little bit more patient. They're not getting paid for this. Usually volunteers are volunteering for your organization because they have a passion for what you are doing, a passion for your organization and those many programs, projects, services, and activities that you are currently producing for the surrounding communities. And again, make sure your volunteers know exactly what you need from them and what their responsibilities are. So that detailed job description. We also want to make sure that our volunteers, that we are consistently pointing them back to our organization's mission and vision. So we want to ensure that by the time 6 months of volunteer service with our organization is completed, we have stressed our mission and vision to where everyone within that organization can recite it. They've memorized it, right? Our mission and our vision is what launches us forward within our nonprofit organization. And everyone needs to hear this. I don't care who you are. I tout to nonprofit leaders and volunteers alike in just about every course that I teach for both universities. Say thank you and say it often. And I'm going to talk about some very simple, inexpensive ways. They're kind of cheesy. However, I will tell you they work beautifully, that you can afford to say thank you to your volunteers many different ways throughout the entire year. Okay. And again, I'm going to stress it time and time again this evening. Make sure consistent communication, right? Keep them in the loop with what you're thinking, what the organization, where the organization is going. Make sure to keep all of your volunteers up to speed. And then take time to work on projects with different people on your team. Mix it up. That you're going to find that some volunteers get along better with others. However, we really want to build this very wonderful, equipped, empowered team of volunteers for our organization. So mix it up. And do exactly what you're doing here this evening, is taking time to train together as well. That really brings organizations together. And when I talk about being a problem solver, work as a team, right? As your leadership team, as the board of directors of this organization, to remove any obstacles that are in any of the volunteers' way, whatever those obstacles are. And this is going to come from feedback, right? From talking to those volunteers to see what is the obstacle. What are your greatest challenges in volunteering for our organization? And always take time to slow down, right? We live in a very high-paced society today. However, take time to slow down and celebrate with your team. And that's what I loved, right? About what are you guys doing after this? You just said, right? You're going to the beer garden, right? So if I were there, I would be the first one to toast you for this wonderful capacity building, right? For your nonprofit organization. So have a toast on me, guys. So when you get there, right? All
Girl,
right.
I'll have a meal just for us.
Okay.
What everybody doesn't know is that Melissa and I are besties and we do cruises together. So we met at Zumba many, many years ago. Moving on.
Zumba in the dark, nonetheless. We kind of bumped into each other, literally. And then find very creative ways, right? Again, you're not going to be able to pay all of your volunteers. However, we can find small ways to reward them. And there's several slides in this presentation, and I'm going to actually send this presentation to Michelle after, so that way she can kind of share it with all of you. And then if you're also interested in what I mentioned earlier, the whole series of articles, right, that I wrote on volunteer leadership, right, as well, I'll send you those that I published. So I won't go through all of those because they're a lot, right? So here we go. So, however, we want to make sure that we do reward. So I kind of warned you that they're a little cheesy. However, they make a really, really big impact here. So one of the first ones is, just go out and buy a box of Band-Aids, right? So this one at the top here, you keep us from being infected by negative thoughts and views, right? Or it could be, with the Band-Aid, you are the one that holds this organization together, right? So kind of think outside of the box. That's one that I've done a lot with. I've also done the matches as well. I have also customized lighters with our organization's logo. Okay, so we know that a lot of people in today's society don't typically smoke anymore. However, we all typically have candles. If we have outdoor fire pits, whatever that looks like for everybody, lighters are very useful. And so no one matches up to you. No one lights up next to you, right? Whatever the slogan you may want to have there. So if you can put your logo for your organization on these appreciation gifts as well, this is also an awareness building, because that's going to get you impressions. So if somebody's over, let's say if Christy's house, we're having a bonfire, we're doing gourmet adult s'mores, right? Somebody sees Christy's, lighter, and they're like, ooh, Christy, well, I didn't know you volunteered for them. Tell me more about the organization, right? And so this is another way to then get the word out as well. I've done the M&M candies as well. They typically will put the organization's name. They're little, sticklers about logos and the whole trademark situation. So usually they don't want to do that. The puzzle piece I have done as well, made them into magnets. So painted, typically you can get giant puzzles at the thrift store for next to nothing, right? You paint them, put a little magnet on the back of them. They hang it on their refrigerator to let them know that volunteers are a very important piece of the puzzle for our organization. And actually, that was the title of my volunteer leadership series of articles, right? Was the giant piece of the puzzle for nonprofit organizations. Because if you think about nonprofit organizations, every nonprofit organization, no matter what their size, they got started with volunteers first. Okay. So somebody who had a passion for whatever cause within the nonprofit sector, and they rallied other volunteers as well. There is going to be a sample poem. It's the Volunteer Bill of Rights on one of the slides that we're going to see in just a few moments. I've also had that printed out, rolled that up. Volunteers love that. That's kind of the volunteer motto in the nonprofit sector. So if you've not seen that, I've also done the Q-tip one. That one kind of gets mixed reviews, right? So if you didn't hear us clean out your ears, right? A little bit of a non-medical safety thing going on here, right? However, people tend to love it. And the Tootsie Roll as well. So that's a good one. The Volunteer Bill of Rights. Here this is, I know it's probably a little difficult to read if you've exited full screen on Zoom this evening. I will send this in a large format to all of you as well. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about, right, equipping our volunteers, what they need. They're going to need a detailed job description. They're going to need a handbook, right? They're going to need consistent communication from us as the leadership of the nonprofit organization. And then we've talked about ways to empower volunteers as well through those VIP meetings, through the consistent communication, making time to celebrate, right, our volunteers, ensuring that we are saying thank you a lot and that we are appreciating our volunteers. So now let's talk a little bit about volunteer retention. So here's why we really want to get this right. Number one, there's no more time that we're wasting, right? Chasing down board members, volunteers are constantly being on the search because someone's left the organization, right? We don't want what I referred to earlier as that revolving door of volunteers who just keep leaving the organization. And if we have more trusted volunteers, then we're going to be able as an organization to make better decisions, the best decisions for the organization, because they're going to be committed, what I call CAPS, committed, active, passionate, positive stewards of the organization. Okay, they're going to be the true ambassadors of our organization. So that's what we want, is we want more ambassadors telling our story of the great work that we do in Henderson County. And we want them building those strong, lasting connections and relationships. You're also going to find when you get volunteer retention right, that you're going to raise more money with this very strong team of volunteers. And you're going to sleep better because your stress level is going to be reduced as well. You're not going to worry, right? All of a sudden, the Beekeepers Association is just humming right along. We have all of these wonderful ambassadors for the organization and volunteers that the organization is just moving in the right direction. So at the end of the day, what we really want is we want greater mission achievement. This is why we exist in the first place, right? Is our mission. So our mission statement describes to people outside of the organization where we are going. So our mission statement is the statement that if we achieve that, our nonprofit organization can basically dissolve. We've succeeded. We're successful. Oh, and I love that, Michelle. Instead of humming right along, buzzing right along. Absolutely. I love that. Wonderful. Now, all of this, right, I know firsthand. So in addition to being an instructor for 2 universities, I've also been an executive director in the nonprofit sector since 1999. So from 1999 until 2015. You have to trust this process and give it time. Many of you would agree that Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So developing these job descriptions, developing our employee handbook, developing this consistent communication strategy is not going to happen overnight. Some of you may be making right now as I'm talking notes, maybe an action plan, whatever that looks like for you. Trust me when I say that you won't be able to turn this out overnight. Okay. So also what we need to do is get them involved. Okay, so if your organization has committees or projects, get them involved right away, these volunteers. This way, they're interacting with other volunteers quickly and building those relationships within your organization. Plus, what they can see is something that they are involved in that is tangible right out of the gate, okay? So if they come on board, don't allow them to sit around for several months before getting them involved in the organization, okay? And then if you have retiring board members or volunteers who are just like, you know, I'm in a different season of life right now, whatever that may look like, I don't have the time to devote to being a full-time volunteer, create what is known as a legacy committee, to where we are still involving them. They're still getting those VIP communications, we're still using them as a vital resource for the organization. They have a skill set, they have the history, and they have the knowledge. We don't want to lose that for any organization. So structure your legacy committee however it best serves and suits your organization, whether this is a fundraising committee, whether this is a true advisory committee, whatever that looks like for your organization. Also, when we get new board members and or volunteers on board with us, match them with a buddy and or a mentor. So this is kind of a volunteer program for our organization. So veteran volunteers, veteran board members are needed here, right? So this could be our legacy committee. They're tasked with the sole responsibility of being a buddy and or a mentor to our new volunteers and or board members. My philosophy here is keep it simple, okay? So ask the mentor to simply reach out before the first meeting, to sit with them at the meeting, to introduce them at the meeting, if it's in person or if it's virtual. If they miss a meeting, call them to say, hey, we missed you at the meeting. Is everything okay? After the first couple of meetings, reach out to them. Did you have any questions, comments, concerns? Because what happens when we get new board members and or volunteers involved in an organization, there's already a lot of history. There's already a lot of dynamics going on within the existing volunteers. And so with this new volunteer may not feel comfortable enough, right? Raising their hand, asking the question of, I don't know what that abbreviation means, or I don't know what that acronym means, or I'm not really sure what you're talking about, okay? So with this mentor, with this buddy, having them reach out to them before that meeting and say, just write some notes down. So if you're not comfortable asking, write some notes down, and then report back, right, to me, because I'm going to be contacting you as your mentor, as your buddy, to see if there was any questions that I can answer for you, right? And then that mentor and that buddy needs to reach out then to your key leadership team of volunteers to let them know what questions are being asked. Are these questions that we then need to incorporate in our volunteer handbook, right? Of things that volunteers need to know to be successful with our organization. And make your meeting agendas count. I know this sounds simple. However, one of the fastest ways to lose board members and or volunteers is to waste their time on focusing on the wrong things or by allowing side conversations, right? When there's a very important topic at hand that we all need to be engaged with. We need everyone to pay attention to this. So what I encourage nonprofit leaders, whether it's the volunteer board chair, if you have a staff member, whatever that looks like for your organization, is to develop the agenda a week before the meeting, okay? Then consider things like why each item matters on this agenda. Does this agenda align with our mission, vision, and values of the organization? Is there an opportunity within this agenda to really, right, engage in discussion, meaningful discussion with the volunteers that are going to be in this meeting? Are there too many reports and not enough action, right? That's kind of boring. And then where can a mission moment be included? Okay, so a mission moment. This is where we get the opportunity to be creative and tell great stories, not just in our meetings, but then these stories hopefully are going to make their way outside of the organization into the communities in which we serve, Henderson County, right? So hopefully bringing that mission moment to each meeting to remind your volunteers why they're there. Why are they taking this hour or 2 hours of their time, right? So this could be in the form of a letter, a live testimonial from one of your constituents, whatever that looks like. It could be one of you telling the story of why you were there, right? So Mark may get on and say, hey, you know, this is my story. This is how I became involved in this nonprofit organization. This is why I'm so passionate about this. Okay. So make them feel. This will continue to flame your volunteers' passion for your organization. So that feel good moment, that mission moment, right? Make it fun. Now, everybody, I'm not talking about the fun like date night or kid in a candy store fun, right? However, it is important to keep in mind that once again, your volunteers are giving up time, either personally and or professionally for your organization. So they're volunteering for you when they could be doing something else. So we need to make an effort to include some fun, right? So scheduling some of that social time. That's why the beer outing this evening is so vitally important. But think about it also during your meetings, right? So whether it's virtual via Zoom, sending everybody out to breakout sessions and answering maybe one of the 36 Arthur Aaron's questions on how to get to know somebody really quickly. I use that template a lot when I'm doing individual fundraising, one-on-one fundraising, of how to interview somebody, right? One of the questions that I love to ask people, you really get to know someone just with this one question, is if there's anybody past, present, or future that you could invite for dinner, who would that be and why? So that's a really great question. So even if it's virtual on Zoom for those meetings, send them to breakout sessions, 2 people at a time, one-on-one, and ask some of those questions. And then I hope this goes without saying, our society though is so food driven right now, right? If you think about it, when somebody contacts you, say, Christy, let's say that a long lost friend suddenly comes into town, right? They come into Hendersonville and they're like, Christy, I'm going to be in Hendersonville for the day. Where would you like to meet, right? For breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, for cocktails, whatever the case may be. That's typically what happens in today's society. So continuing that within your nonprofit organization. Feed your volunteers and feed them well. Work with local restaurants for discounts, whatever they may look like for your organization, however, feed them well. And then also one-on-one with your leadership person. So your board chair, your volunteer leader, whatever this looks like. This is vitally important to the success of the overall volunteer program within your organization. So the first 90 days, no agenda here, just to get to know them better, okay? Even if they're already friends, right? Because this is about relationship building. We want to continue to fuel their passion for our organization, okay? This is a nice opportunity for them to kind of connect outside of a structured meeting. Okay, so no agenda here, nothing. Okay. Once again, offer regular trainings. Okay, so whether this is a training for your organization specific, like new tips and tricks for beekeeping, whatever that may look like, or if it's for this type of training, what we're doing right now, right, is volunteer training. And then conducting that mid-year check-in. So halfway through their first year, okay, whenever that falls, get a new class of volunteers together for, once again, food, right? Lunch, happy hour, whatever that looks like. Have then the relaxed conversation in addition to asking very specific questions, such as, how are you enjoying volunteering so far for our organization? Have you experienced any surprises? What else can we do to ensure that this is a positive experience for you going forward with our organization? Take their feedback to heart for continuous improvement of your organization. And then the year-end surveys. I'm going to tell you, everyone, I love digital surveys. They're a great way to get honest, reliable feedback because people don't have to sign them, right? They can submit this anonymously. and they're also free, right? We don't typically, there's so many platforms out there available for those year-end surveys right now, okay? So keep that in mind. So making sure that on those year-end surveys, asking them some also questions related to their onboarding process, in addition to some of the questions in that mid-year check-in as well, right? So how's it going? What additional questions related to their orientation would they like to have seen? Is there anything that they think that's missing from our volunteer manual? How did it go with their buddy and or mentor match? Did they experience any issues? How can we improve that as well? Okay. And I cannot stress this enough, as a nonprofit leader for many years, always invite feedback and then do something with it. So if you're going to conduct that 90-day, that mid-year review, and then also that end of the year, do not allow these surveys to sit in a Google Drive and collect dust, or on a shelf and collect dust, whatever that looks like for your organization. This is one of the easiest ways to empower volunteers, is to provide these opportunities for them to share their feedback with you. So once they give that feedback, again, we must do something with it. Volunteers hopefully should know, right, within the first 90 days that their impact matters when they see us do something with their feedback. So they can see changes as a result of their feedback. One quick little story here, because we're kind of running out of time and I'm almost through, I promise. I remember one time when I was executive director, I transitioned out of the corporate sector in 1999, became an executive director. That nonprofit organization was a very large one here in North Carolina and South Carolina. And I was their executive director for 11 years. And I remember this one specific volunteer, when they came to me, it was one of our education volunteers, and she shared some very deep struggles with me. And at the end of the conversation, after I really listened to this volunteer, I shared with her that her input was very valuable to me and very valuable to the organization. And I asked her to please brainstorm some possible creative solutions to these struggles. So after a few hours after the conversation we had departed, I received an email from this volunteer with a link to a resource that helped with these struggles. So what happened here was that volunteer went home after serving our organization, the couple of hours of that volunteer service, and scoured the internet for some solutions to this problem that they had came to me with. So you know what I did? I purchased that resource immediately, which was a game changer, an absolute game changer for the volunteers within our education sector, where our programs were, and then also all of our programs. So the volunteer was empowered, right, to speak up with feedback and then make suggestions for solutions to the problems that they were struggling with. Ultimately, this volunteer left that solution extremely empowered. And so as a result, our leadership team and our volunteer team grew that much stronger. So in my experience as a nonprofit leader, high capacity volunteers, often they don't have the loudest voice. However, what they're going to do is they're going to wait to be asked for their input and feedback. So make sure you're asking. And then when they provide you an answer, do something with it. Don't just let it sit there. So for those of you who want a little bit more information about me, a shameless little plug for my TED Talk. I have a TED Talk on fundraising. This is how to have a love affair with your constituent database and build that relationship. It's all about relationship building. And when you do that, then you'll never have to ask for money again. Money will just come to you. So a shortened little URL there. Once again, I will send this entire PowerPoint presentation deck to Michelle after this, and she can share it. And then If you have questions after this, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I always find in any workshops, keynotes, and/or classes that I give, the most important questions come after the fact when you try to take this information and implement it into your organization. Questions such as, now, what did Melissa say? I was trying to write that down. I could not remember. Whatever that looks like for you, this is my personal email address and also my personal cell phone. I do pride myself on returning every text message, every voicemail, and every email. It may take me a couple of days. Coming out of COVID and the pandemic right now, my travel schedule is a little bit more hurried than it was during COVID and the pandemic. So do give me a couple of days, but I will return your message regardless of what format that is. And I wanted to leave about 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. I have 8 minutes. So sorry, everyone, I went over by about 2 minutes. Hopefully it was good information. So for those of you who didn't have the opportunity to ask questions during the presentation, please, I'm here.
That's really wonderful. Let's give her, unmute yourself and then ask questions.
Thank you, Michelle.
So I have to go back and watch your presentation like 4 more times in order to
I agree.
assimilate all of this information and figure ways that we can tailor it to our specific organization. Some of it is easier to apply to our organization than others. But I thought all the points that you hit on were extremely perceptive and useful. So thank you.
Oh, good, Christy. And I tried to tailor it a little bit to the Beekeepers Association as well. So hopefully I did that. Normally this is more of a generalized, right, presentation, as you can see. So I'm happy to help in any way that I can with that as well, tailoring that. So thank you.
And after I do that, then I'll probably have some questions. So thank you for the contact information.
Absolutely.
Because our problem relates, I think, more to getting people involved and keeping them involved than it does to fundraising. But even the fundraising points are applicable in many ways to that, I think.
I would agree, Christy. And let me just give you one statistic to back that up. 9 out of every 10 volunteers are also a donor of the organization. So when you start thinking about, right, fundraising for the organization, volunteers can make a huge impact in fundraising as individual donors. So if you take the latest IRS charitable statistics that we're seeing currently and combine individual donors with bequests, then individual donors make up 85% of all charitable gifts in this country.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Can you repeat that?
Sure. So the latest IRS statistics that we're seeing, and this report comes out every year. Now, keep in mind that the IRS is typically behind a year because what they wait on is they wait on individual tax returns, and then the majority of nonprofit organizations file their 990s on May the 15th, which is due the 5th month after the fiscal year end on the 15th day. So they're typically a year behind. So we're working with right now 2021 numbers. So with those, by Giving USA, so Giving USA is the one that comes out with this report. They kind of compile all the data from the IRS. So the largest piece of the pie right now, if you add individual donors and bequests together, that's 85% of all charitable giving in the United States.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so sure how much we're in the category of seeking, of going after money and contributions and all that. A lot of the stuff with retention and keeping volunteers active and getting them involved, I think there's a lot of great points there.
Mhm.
But I mean, you know, if you guys feel otherwise, you know, you can chime in, but you know, we don't need to do a whole lot of fundraising. We have our B school and then the dues and everything like that. And every now and then somebody will give us $10.
Well, dues are just as important, Jim. I would
Right,
agree
yeah.
with you there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
Yes.
dues in itself is a form of fundraising. Absolutely.
Sure, yeah.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is I know a lot of nonprofits, a big part of their, you know, activity and emphasis is on fundraisers
Sure.
but they're like clubs that are helping out with, you know, crippled kids or, you know, Alzheimer's or, you know, various things that requires, you know, big bucks, or bigger bucks at any rate. So we're just trying to teach people about pollinators and bees but we have had some pretty big programs this past year.
I
Well,
think
we have, and I think that while fundraising is not perhaps, or seeking donations is not our number one priority by any means, doesn't hurt to have that information in your back pocket in case that opportunity arises to do so without offending our members.
Right. You mean without raising the dues?
Without raising the dues or without seeming like, you know, the only thing we are interested in our membership for is, you know, how much money we can wring out of them. But I think it's another tool in the tool chest to keep in mind in the back of our mind for if we wanted to do a special speaker series again, and perhaps we needed funds to pay that rather than wanting to lower our regular bank account, you know, things like that.
Right.
It's just another option.
So I was, you know, one of the things that I'm seeing from the presentation rather than fundraising, I'm seeing appreciation and acknowledgement as the key takeaway from the presentation. You know, we have had issues with criticism and people feeling like it's just not fun, right? And they're like, why bother? And then they move on and they'd rather go do something that they're more passionate about. I know that I personally have struggled with feeling like this is something that I actually want to choose to do. And so I keep choosing it. And, you know, I think that because I'm a volunteer too, I keep reflecting on, well, when things feel good and they're fun, you know, like when we're out at a festival or we're meeting with the school system and talking about creating a new curriculum, or I'm on the phone with Mark and he's super stoked about the newsletter. I just finished with our new intern. You know, for me, those are the things that keep me coming back rather than throwing in the towel. And one thing that the other takeaway that I got from the presentation was there's no manual, right? There was not in my president's working document. I was trying to capture everything that Pat Rowe, my predecessor, was telling me in the first few months. And the most that we have is this Google Drive that's, you know, the most we have is our bylaws. Like there's nothing that really helps the directors understand what they're doing. So I've started to put those videos together to kind of help people just know the basics of what they're doing. But a manual would be a volunteer manual, like that actually helps the people at the apiary or how to actually volunteer, you know, around meetings to help set up and take down, to be part of our education committee. These are the types of retention pieces I think that are strong takeaways from the presentation. I think Mark also had a comment or a question.
I did, and what it relates to is some of the things we want volunteers for, like I've asked in the newsletter for people to help set up a conference room or presentation room to contact Michelle about that. But I think maybe part of the reason people aren't interested in doing that is maybe because, well, help set up. What does that mean? So I guess, in taking this home and digesting it, let's say, okay, well, let's be explicit about what we need the volunteers to do. We need, your time at 5:45 to put out 20 chairs, this. And, and I think the other part of that is, besides being explicit, is giving them a way to sign up. Other than contacting, I think that leaves it kind of vague. Am I making sense there?
Definitely. Yes. So Mark, if you want professional volunteers, right, then put an application out there on the organization's website, on your social media, apply to become a volunteer. That then gives your organization this next level of credibility. Oh my goodness, we've got to apply to become a volunteer. They're serious.
Oh.
Wow. Right. They
Yeah,
really have their act together.
We did that with an internship, and I was like thinking for kids, and I heard from 3 adults who want to make career changes. I was like shocked. And I was like, oh yeah.
Absolutely.
I lost my second thought.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mark.
That's okay. No, I lost it myself. You didn't help me lose it.
I just really thought, Mark,
Anybody else can jump in.
point was great. Yeah, to have that application process and to have the detailed job description. Yes.
Now I
good.
sometimes I feel, and I hear it from other people, probably of my generation, who say, well, since the pandemic and we've moved a lot of things to Zoom, there are times when I feel, well, it kind of like gives people the opportunity to kind of disengage. They can attend the meeting, their name's there, but their picture isn't there. They're muted. They're there, but they're not there. I know it sounds like you're very in tune to using Zoom, and that's how you work in this day and age right now. But, do you have any feel for is that how some people view it, as an opportunity to be involved, but not to be involved?
Yes, actually, it's really interesting that you bring this up, because I was just actually speaking. The department that I teach in at Duke, we just got a new dean for that department. And this individual comes with a lot of online virtual teaching experience. So the department that I taught in prior to March of 2020, we did not do anything online. We were all in person. And so how to then get people engaged, right? So we send out expectations of our virtual meetings as well. So just like if you were in a in-person boardroom, a board meeting, right? You have to be present for X number according to our bylaws. Otherwise, we can then ask you to leave the organization and get somebody else who's going to be involved and actively participating. So in the courses and the classes that I teach, if you are off camera and you are not participating, meaning I cannot see physically, you're not asking, you're not participating in the polls. And that's what I really kind of encourage. So if you're having a meeting online, all of a sudden pop up a poll. Zoom is so easy to do this. It could be a trivia around bees, right? It could be a trivia around Henderson County, right? History, whatever that looks like for your organization. But if they are not present, meaning that they are off camera, they have not been actively participating, as the instructor, I am cutting them loose. I am kicking them out of the Zoom. It is very distractive for people. So we're kind of getting to this new norm with virtual meetings, and then they're not going to get credit for that course, that presentation. Yeah.
That's kind of like several years ago, we had an opening on the board and the vice president at the time had this member who was retired, and he had been in, corporate world and on several boards of, and and their home here is just a retirement home. They only come up in the summer. And I don't know if it was somebody else told me, or I actually talked to the guy myself, and he said, sure, I'll be on the board. I'm on a lot of boards, I don't have to do anything, but I'll be on the board. And it was kind of like, and so when the meeting came around, and a guy had come up to me and said, hey, can I get that position? I'd really like to help out. So they were trying to start the election, and I said, can we nominate somebody for XYZ position? And they said, well, I guess so. And so I put his name up, and everybody knew him. He had just kind of been in the background doing stuff, but then all of a sudden he was saying, I could do that. And he got, like most of the people raised their hand for him. But, and he was actively involved, whereas the other guy wouldn't have, would have been the one of those people you would have been going like, how do you?
You're out of here.
I have, maybe it's a rhetorical question, but why are people busier today than they were when I was raising children and working? Because you hear that a lot. Oh, I'm too busy to get involved. And when I was on active duty in the Navy, I worked, full-time job, and yet I was the Cub master for our children's Cub Scout group, and I was able to give time to do that. My wife was able to be, lead a group of the Cub Scouts, and then she was also able to be the Brownie leader for our daughter. And why do I keep hearing, oh, I'm too busy. I can't attend a meeting. I can't do this. I can't do that.
Well, in my professional opinion, Mark, I will answer that question because, every single week I talk to a lot of volunteers and a lot of board members alike. And the common theme that I hear is that there's too many meetings in which nothing happens. So when I was talking about making sure that your agendas count, right? Don't overmeet. And then also those clear expectations of how many hours. Because if you get somebody who's really good at volunteering, suddenly now they're burned out, right? So we need to have that clear expectation. We need to have that clear job description. And we need to make sure that our meetings do count. And we need to appreciate our volunteers. I mean, the number one reason why volunteers stop volunteering for a nonprofit organization is they don't feel that they were appreciated. I mean, it's the same thing with donors as well. The number one reason why donors stop giving to a nonprofit organization is they were never properly thanked. And so if you watch my TED Talk, I talk about this, but it's the same thing hand in hand with volunteers and donors. They're not properly thanked. And the next time that they hear from us after they give us their time and or their money is when we need it again. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, speaking of, and by Dr. Kelly, that's why I leave. So it's just like Eleanor Roosevelt said, people are about as happy as they make up their minds to be, or is that Benjamin Franklin? I can't remember, but it's true. People aren't really busy. They just tell you that they're busy. In my world, busy is a 4-letter word. And if you hear me say I'm too busy for that, it probably means I'm not interested.
It's great.
Right. And that's what I think people really use it as an excuse, because they're sitting over there for another hour sitting on their social media. So that people have time. It's just a matter of commitment. And so it goes back to, and we'll close at this. When somebody's complaining, and this is especially going to be important next Monday at our barbecue, when people are complaining, how can we turn that complaint into a commitment? Because they wouldn't even be talking to us if they weren't really committed to something, right? I've heard from members recently about the apiary and the honey, like what they want to do with the honey. Everybody's got an opinion about what to do with our honey. They've got a strong commitment to the club, and that needs to be nurtured. How can we thank them? How can we utilize time? Me, I like to have an hour meeting. We're 10 minutes over. And so I'm like, let's make sure that we're utilizing everybody's time well. So that's my priority. And I think that people really appreciate that. And we are seeing the club grow. We are seeing the directors and the members expressing appreciation for the communication in the newsletters, the communication in the videos, the communication. Chrissy's doing these little interviews with beekeepers. Jim is leading a committee of education people with festivals, like really supporting our busy board director who travels quite a bit. And we're doing so many things that are great and good. And I hope that for those of you watching this recording later, I just want everybody to think twice when they actually criticize, because every time you criticize, you need at least 7 acknowledgements to cancel out that one criticism.
Yeah, every negative
Melissa?
needs, like, I heard 10 positives
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah. So every time, I get a shitty email, I have to go sort myself out, and it comes in the middle of a work day when I've got clients who are also being, they're paying me, and so they get a little more grace. But when I'm a volunteer and I'm getting a nasty text or an email, it just takes the lifeblood out of me. So let's all be nice. Melissa or anybody else, final words?
I just want to say thank you so very much. This
Yes.
was fabulous and
You're
informative.
welcome. Thank you. And it was an honor to be here with all of you. So I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Have a drink from me, please. Enjoy your time together. Make
You
it count.
will, and I don't know, you might see like a little thank you gift. Oh, look who's here. Oh my, we could have been it together.
I didn't know you were in the parking lot.
I'm in the parking lot. Dr. Kelly's standing right here. Melissa, you may get a package for me this week. I love you. Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.